The beautiful statue behind me is that of the Russian Emperor Peter the Great, here in the city which he founded, St. Petersburg, now called Leningrad. Peter called this port city Russia's window to Europe. Hello, I'm Burt Lancaster. Let me tell you something about Leningrad's fascinating history. In 1917, Leningrad was the site of the October Revolution, which signaled the end of the Tsarist regime and the beginning of the Soviet state. When Lenin died, the city was renamed in his memory. In the history of the unknown war, Leningrad stands out as a symbol of the courage and persistence of the Russian people. For days, weeks, months, years, Leningrad resisted capture by Hitler's forces. In the aching cold of winter, with nothing to eat, no way to keep warm, hundreds of thousands of Leningraders perished from starvation or simply froze to death. Still, they fought on. During the terrifying siege, which the Russians call the 900 days, Nazi troops encircled the city and cut off all communications. But Leningrad would not surrender. And now, that story, the Siege of Leningrad. Leningrad, founded by Peter the Great on the marshes of the Neva River, one of the world's most beautiful cities, often called the Venice of the North, an extraordinary city that enjoys a very special place in the hearts of its citizens. Leningraders are the heirs of a unique past. They are ordinary people, ordinary men, women, children. Like people everywhere, they fall in love, marry, raise families. And dream dreams. In 1941, there were over 2.5 million people in Leningrad. For them, the war would be different. Success or failure would depend as much on their strength as on the brilliance of the generals. 2.5 million Leningraders. 1 out of every 3 of them would die of starvation, of bombs, of shells, of sub-zero cold. They would die by the hundreds of thousands, men, women, children. Within days of the Nazi attack on Russia, on June 22nd, 1941, Lithuania and Latvia had been overrun, and the Germans were moving deliberately on Leningrad with over 1 million troops, 600 tanks, and 1,000 planes. Their allies, the Finns, were also poised for the attack north of the city. Nazi panzer divisions smashed into ancient Pskov, crushing everything in their path. The road to Leningrad was in flames. The symbols of Russian culture and style were known to the world. In this cradle of Russian scholarship and art, the poet Pushkin wrote. The composer Mussorgsky wrote his music in Leningrad. Pavlov experimented with dogs on conditioned reflexes. The ballerina Pavlova danced in classical ballet for Russian Grand Dukes. It was in Leningrad that Lenin and the Bolsheviks changed the world's political structure in 1917. The German Army Group Nord was expected to conquer Leningrad in 4 weeks. by July 21st, 1941. On the ground with the 16th and the 18th Field Armies and the 4th Tank Group of the Wehrmacht, Hitler was determined to capture Leningrad quickly and then send the same forces to envelop Moscow. The Nazi performance in the initial stage of the attack gave Hitler every reason for confidence. He had taken the enemy once again, completely by surprise. In command was Field Marshal Ritter von Lieb. Hitler predicted, at the first blow, the Russian army will experience a defeat greater than the one suffered by the French army. Leningrad was to be the first great Soviet city to fall. In all her long history, Leningrad had never been invaded. Now her children prepared to defend her. In the very first days of the war, hundreds of thousands of Leningraders enlisted for military service. They were formed into units of Opolchenia, the Home Guard, ill-trained, ill-armed. More had volunteered, but could not be spared from vital war industry plants. They marched off confidently, almost all of them to their deaths. They were fighting for time to build defenses. Into the birch forests, into the battle. First line of defense was gouged from the earth at Luga, 125 miles west of the city. It would stop the Germans for a few weeks. There was a second line at Gachina, some 20 miles outside the city. The innermost line of barricades, 22 miles long, ran along the city limits. The defense lines were built by men and women, many of whom were unused to physical labor. Many of them middle-aged, not a few of them in their late 60s and 70s. The white kerchiefs of the women made them easy targets. Low-flying Nazi planes took a heavy toll of the unarmed men and women as they labored in the fields. In all, they put up 350 miles of defense works, 15,000 bunkers. It took nearly 500,000 people to build them. Leningraders would be able to walk to the front line.